Good morning. We look today at John 18 verses 1 through 18. Jesus has just finished his meal and everything with his disciples, and verse 18 once says, after Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. So, it wasn't a long distance that he went, but across this Kidron Valley, it sounds like he might have gone on a long journey, but it really wasn't so awfully far. It was just, this was between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. It was the Garden of Gethsemane as we know it. And so they went there, and it tells us, John writes that Judas knew that this was a place that Jesus often went because Judas had been with him. He knew that this place we call the Garden of Gethsemane was a location that Jesus often went and would spend time in prayer and reflection and different things that way. And so it was there that Judas brought this, it says, a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees. And they came with lanterns and torches and weapons. And I know I've commented on this before, but he brought a detachment of soldiers along with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees. So the chief priests, these religious leaders, had their own police department. Probably, it's kind of, we don't really think about security guards too much, but I know that there are churches that have security guards, and in so many ways today, it's getting to the point that you almost feel that you feel safer when you go someplace and you see security guards. And I know that there are many malls, especially now, that are having security guards, somewhat for the protection of the businesses against theft and deterrent, but also as a safety net, a safety precaution for those that shop there, just partially for that feeling of security. Yet, with everything going on in our world today, there are many people that are afraid of police officers, that they see somebody with a uniform on and that they're a security guard, a police officer, and fear strikes their hearts. And it shouldn't be that way. These are the people that are in our society to protect and to serve. That's what their motto, to serve and protect. And yet, we've got things so turned around in our world, it's crazy. But anyway, Judas came with this contingent of soldiers and police to arrest Jesus, and with swords and lanterns and with weapons. And of course it's night, so they come with lanterns so they can see that there weren't street lights and things of that nature. Then we're so tuned into having street lights in the cities, and we got yard lights in our farmyards, and it's not dark very often, but they brought torches so that they could see. And they came, and it said, in John's gospel, again, now you need to remember, and I've commented this before too, but in John's gospel, Jesus is in charge. Jesus, so Jesus comes to these people. And it says, Jesus, knowing what was happened, came forward and asked them, who are you looking for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And so he says, I am he. And, and it says Judas was standing with them. And when Jesus said these words, I am he, he said, I'm the one you're looking for. What does John tell us that happened? It says they stepped back and fell to the ground. These soldiers of the Roman Empire, I don't know who all fell down, but there was soldiers, the Roman soldiers, there were the police of the chief priests and the Pharisees, and it says they stepped back and fell down to the ground. They knelt down. And again, Jesus says, who are you looking for? And they say again, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I told you I am he, so if you're looking for me, let these men go. Let my disciples go. Don't bother them. If you're looking for me, here I am, take me, and let them go. And John tells us that was in order that the prophecy would be fulfilled, that Jesus would, that none of those whom Jesus had chosen had been that had lost, except the one Judas that way. So the soldiers, I mean, they get back up off of their knees. They stand back up and they arrest Jesus. They bind him, they tie him, and it's it's in the other gospels. Jesus will say, "Well, you come at night. You've seen me." And maybe later in the trials here too. But it's just they come at night when it's dark, when there are fewer people around Jesus, to kind of protect him, to kind of stand up for him. I mean, they're looking for Jesus at his vulnerable point. They arrest him and they tie him up. Can you imagine this Jesus? He's been just teaching and healing, and he hasn't done anything to harm anybody. Yet they tie him up, they bind him, like they're afraid that something's going to happen. And I think about that, and all of the binding that they could have done on Jesus, wouldn't make any difference what they bound him with, shackles and chains, it's just like the Gerasene demoniac, when he was demon possessed, he could break the chains and stuff. Jesus would have been able to slip any kind of binding that they were to put on him if he wanted to. And this is the reality. Yet Jesus accepts being arrested and being taken away. And but while this was all going on, John tells us that Peter took his sword and cut the ear off of the high priest, of a slave named Malchus. And Jesus said, "Put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup that my Father has given me?" Jesus is saying, now isn't the time for swords. Now isn't the time to be fighting back and standing up against the authorities. There will come a time for that. And there was a time when Jesus said, gird your loins, take your swords, and go. He understood the perils of different times, but this was not. This was not the time to be resisting, because this was the time that Jesus had come for, and he knew that. So it says that the soldiers, their officer, there's one officer, a contingent of soldiers, and it seems to me, I don't remember exactly now, but they brought the contingent of soldiers, it could have been 80 or 100. There were quite a few soldiers there to arrest this one very peaceful, very loving, very gentle man. But they came to arrest him. So they took him first. It says they took him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of the high priest Caiaphas. So, Caiaphas is the high priest, and Annas is the father of the high priest. So, why did they take Jesus first to Annas, who is the father of the high priest? He was no longer a leader of any sort. He wasn't in charge or in control of anything. He had been deposed from the throne. Maybe he had been the king of Jerusalem, but who knows? But he was no longer in any authoritative position. Yet they took him there first. And then John tells us the reminder that Caiaphas, the high priest, was the one that had said, it's better for have one person to die for all the people. It was a prophecy that Caiaphas had. It's better to let Jesus be arrested and have this happen to him than for the Roman government to think that there was going to be a revolt and to really come down hard on all of the Jews, little knowing that the crucifixion, the death of Jesus, was a part of God's plan. So we have some of those things tied in, and we've got the different power struggles of, Annas no longer being in any authority, yet he's the one that they bring him to. It's, there's some confusion on the part of everybody in here, and it's a part of the showing the confusion of the world, I think. There is so much going on that just isn't what it should be. And this is one of those examples of why would the soldiers, if the soldiers are there to arrest Jesus, why would they take him to the Jewish authorities rather than to the Roman authorities? How did the high priests get the Roman governor to send his contingent? There's so much here that makes my head just kind of go, the what's and the whys, and there aren't definite answers for them, but doesn't make a difference, I guess, in an awful lot of ways, because Jesus says that this is what's going to happen. Put your sword away, don't fight it, just let it be. And then the last verses we look at, 15 through 18, it says Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus, and the other disciple is, of course, the gospel writer John. And he says that since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter, not being known, was left standing outside the gate. He wasn't allowed in until John, this other disciple anyway, went and talked to the woman who guarded the gate, and then John was able to bring Peter into the courtyard. And if Peter hadn't been allowed into the courtyard, would the prophecy that Jesus had said at the end of chapter 13, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter is in the courtyard. And this woman, in John's gospel, this woman at the gate, the one that John convinces to let Jesus in, this woman at the gate is the first one to ask Peter, you are not also one of the man's disciples, are you? Or aren't you one of the man's disciples? Sometimes you are not one of the man's disciples, are you? It's not the way we would ask a question, but her question is, or she's kind of stating a fact that you're one of his disciples, aren't you? And he denies it. He said, I am not. And then the last verse we read today, it says the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves. Peter also went and stood with them and was warming himself. A charcoal fire. And that's going to come back into play in chapter 20 of John's gospel. But Jesus had been arrested, and Peter and John are in the courtyard. And Peter is standing with the group of people, wondering what's going to happen. Heartsick that his Lord, his Savior, the Messiah, has been arrested, and not knowing what to do. But think of the heaviness of his heart. They don't tell us that, when he first said this, I am not one of his disciples, did Peter have a little feeling of, Jesus said something about that? Or was it really not until the 3rd time? And we'll talk about that tomorrow. And tomorrow I'll be coming to you live earlier. You'll be able to watch or listen at any point in time. But I'll be on early tomorrow morning. Don't know what time for sure, but probably somewhere between 7 and 7:30, somewhere in that time. I would guess tomorrow I'll be on. So the next 3 days I'll be on, maybe a little bit different timing, but thanks for joining me today. I appreciate all of the comments, the likes, and appreciate knowing that I can reach out and share a little bit of God's love each and every day. So God's blessings again this day.